friends, ETJ Writes here. Today I'm going to be talking about some of the books that I have been enjoying since the last time I did a book update video. I've mostly been focusing on my Wayfarer's Redemption read, but I have been able to get a few other books in here and there. I did finish reading the first book in the Flight series, and I really enjoyed that one quite a bit. I definitely want to see what happens next, although I think for me personally, the story would have been more compelling if the very last bit, the epilogue, had been the beginning of the next book, because the way the book ended on the last chapter before the last chapter was something that I was like, oh yes, this is a great way to end this story. I really found myself connecting to the characters a lot, and even though it was written in the first person present tense, which isn't something I'm super into, I really did enjoy how I was able to get inside the character's head. The author did a great job with writing it. I just recently finished reading this other book called Legacy, but it was also called Revolt. Having the same book with two different names and two different covers is extremely confusing. So this is what the first book looks like, and this is what the second one looks like. You see they are completely different. The first one gives you really no indication of what the story is about. The second one does a little bit more, and it's just kind of weird that the author would have retitled and redone the cover to her book. Usually what I see is people do new titles or they do new covers, not both, because otherwise it's very confusing and hard to track down. I was able to track it down, but I would love to know why the author made that change. Sadly, this is a book that I didn't really enjoy too much. The world building was kind of interesting. There were these robots called M's, which I think was short for machine, that kind of helped run society for the privileged. And then everybody else had to live in this place called quarantine because they had committed crimes against the government, except that they hadn't really. The government just put them there to get them out of the way. And this one character, Jet, discovers that as he is flying around and trying to discover a cure for his mom. The main problem I had with this book is that, spoilers, he never discovers the cure. Then he, on the way back home from failing his mission to discover the cure and possibly destroying a very expensive piece of machinery, gets stuck in the quarantine zone with these people who are trying to break out. And he doesn't really learn anything from that experience either. You would think that he would see the plight of these people, realize that, oh, what I've been taught my whole life was a lie, and then try to help them. But at the end of the story, he goes home, he's in his room, and the story literally says that's all that matters, that he is home. There's no resolution to anything. He doesn't succeed in his quest, and he doesn't fail so terribly that there are terrible consequences either. So it's neither a loss or a win. It's just he had a little joyride one day. And if the author was trying to portray that sometimes rich people do things and there are no consequences, I guess that's fine, but it wasn't a very satisfying story. The next book I've been reading is Knight's Ransom by Jeff Wheeler. You all know I'm a Jeff Wheeler aficionado, and I've read most of his books. This takes us back into the world of King Fountain, which was the first of his book series I discovered, and I really enjoy it. It's very, very low on the fantasy scale right now. I've discovered that with some of his books, he likes to kind of ease you into it, and then all the crazy stuff starts happening. But for right now, the characters are really just living in a time of knights and castles, and I love that, so I'm really enjoying it. What's interesting is that the characters are kind of playing out two different types of stories. One of them is the overarching story of King Arthur, which comes into play in a big way in some of his other books. And then the other one is that the character is a little bit acting out the story of Joseph from the Bible. So his, spoilers, king's wife decides that she wants to get with him, and this knight is like, no, I don't want to do that. And so she accuses him of doing it anyway, but he didn't do it, and now he's disgraced and cast out from the kingdom. However, that conveniently frees him up to go on his next quest, so that is probably going to start near the end of the book. Now, there are some prequels and things that I haven't read yet, but they're stories of characters who have been told in some of the other books, and so I'm not super interested in them, but this is a new story with a new character, and I'm very excited to see what happens next. Now, the next book I've been reading is this book, Liquid Death by Mitzi C. I am not really sure how I feel about it yet. It's told in a very abstract way. It's told from first person and it follows these two characters, Candy and Juan, and these characters are both on drugs, not because they want to be on drugs, but because they've had experiments done to them and their captors are afraid of what's going to happen, so they keep them in a state of sedation pretty much all the time. The one character doesn't seem to be quite aware of what's happening to her because of the drugs, and so you see like her perception of events very differently from the other character's perception of events. But from the other character's perspective of events, Juan, he seems to think that Candy knows way more about what's happening than we're getting from Candy's perspective. It's really interesting. I've just reached the part in the book where Candy has regained her agency because, spoilers, they ran out of the drug they were dosing her with, and now she's free to break out and save everybody else. It's a pretty compelling story. I was reading it the other night because I couldn't sleep because I had caffeine, and I made it all the way up to about halfway through in pretty much one shot. So I'm interested in seeing where it goes. Again, I'm not really sure how to feel about it, but the writing is pretty solid. Sometimes the author will throw in a word that is supposed to be fancy, and I'm not sure if they're doing it on purpose because they just thought they needed to put a word in there, or because it's a word that they actually use in their everyday vocabulary. There's definitely some things that I've had to look up. Juan Chavez is Hispanic, so sometimes you'll get sentences in Spanish, and I can kind of guess the meaning, but I've had to go and look it up to discover what the true meaning is. It's just a sentence here or there, but I do enjoy it when books aren't afraid to kind of pepper in things and not explain them, and you kind of have to do the work on your own. Not too much, but a little bit that here and there is nice, because I like it when authors don't spoon feed you. And yes, of course, there's some things they have to explain, but it's more fun if they're not holding you by the hand as you go through from page to page, chapter to chapter. Well, that's what I have been reading so far. Hopefully next time I'll have finished all the books that I just talked about, and I will be on to my next set. I'm really looking forward to getting back into really reading in 2021. 2019 was a great year for reading. 2020, I kind of slacked off a bit, but it's now a new year, and I have a whole bunch of stuff that I think will help me stay on track with my reading and actually hit my Goodreads goal this year. Until next time, happy reading. ETJ out.